then the other thing too, if you have a basement, that's a whole different situation. If you look on this page here, it's the definition of a basement. A basement for flood insurance purposes is where you go below the ground and you actually have to go up steps to get out. That's considered a basement. There's no way you can get out from that bottom floor. Not everything's covered in a basement. And a lot of people are surprised when they have a claim. If you see the building items, these are the only building items that are covered. Air conditioners, drywall for the walls, the electrical junction boxes. They get very specific, and if it's not one of these items, it's not covered in a basement. And contents in a basement, the air conditioning units, if they're portable or the window type, are covered, and clothes washers and dryers and flood freezers are covered. Other than that, there's no contents coverage in the basement. So if you ever hear someone complaining that they had a claim and that wasn't covered, that's why. I know we don't have that many basements around here, nor if you have a ton, but it's different when you have a basement. Let's see. And if you look on the next page, it talks about the rate increases that were going to happen October 1st under this Vicki Whited Flood Insurance Act. What they mainly had a problem with, all this comes from the federal government. You've got congressmen from the Midwest and from the South and from our coastal areas, and they're all wanting to have what's better for them. The congressmen from the West are like, we're not going to subsidize this program and pay for you just because you want to have a beach home. And that's where the conflict comes in. So they wanted to make the rates fair. They said if you have a primary home and it's a flood zone, okay, we understand. That's fine. We'll subsidize the program for you. But if you have a secondary home or a vacation home, we're not. So that's where you're going to see the biggest rate increases with this new program, is under homes that are secondary homes or vacation homes, or your rental properties that are anything but a primary home. There should be a 25% rate increase until Congress feels like the rates are in line with where they can be even with what it costs to run the program, which will never happen. So those rates are going to constantly go up. Under this program too, they talked about that they would do away with grandfathering. And I had a classic example of this off of, this was also, I don't know if you're familiar with Jefferson Boulevard off of Shore Drive. Had a house that was, had a new owner that was buying the house. And this was a mess. So you look at the property now, I pull a flood zone determination, it tells me it's in a VE zone, which is the worst zone you could possibly be in. So rates for that are just astronomical. And honestly, when you talk about rates being terrible for flood insurance, I've never seen one be over $5,000. I don't think you're going to see a flood policy that's through the National Flood Insurance Program that's going to be $10,000. So I don't think the rates go that high. And the other thing I always try to do too is have give a choice of higher deductibles. The highest deductible you can go to is $5,000. Usually when I quote a flood policy, I'll quote it at $1,000, which is minimum deductible, 3 and 5, and show my clients the difference. You can typically save $500 going from $5,000 to $3,000. I mean, $5,000 to $1,000. Most people go with the higher deductible, so that helps when you're doing that. But kind of got off track of what I was talking about. I said the house on Shore Drive is in a VE zone. So the rate was absolutely terrible. But did a little research and found out when this home was originally built, it was built in what we call, this is the key word, compliance with the flood rules at the time. When it was first built, it was in an A zone, and it was built properly. So a lot of work had to be done. The client that was selling the house went back to the city, got a letter from the city saying this house was built on such and such a date. It was in an A zone at the time, and it was built in accordance with the flood insurance rules at the time. I had that letter, presented it to the flood program, and the guy's rate was $1,000 a year, which was great for being right there, smack dab on the water, when it should have been more like $4,000 or $5,000. So this grandfathering, under this bigger Waters Act, they talk about the grandfathering going away. You can't do it anymore. Same thing happens when, I know you all will see this when you have a client that's selling a house, and the new owner wants to assume their policy. They are also talking too about that new owner when typically what will happen, and I use Norfolk because I see it happen so much. You have a house in Norfolk that has a basement. If you have a basement, you're below where it floods. That means the rates are going to be higher than if you're on a crawl space. So what happens is when they do that, they take into consideration in Norfolk, if you have a house that has a basement and someone assumes your policy, and it's an older home, it's rated pre-firm. And they didn't take into consideration that there was a basement. So now what they're requiring under this new act is that when the policy renewed, even if you assumed it, the client had to provide an elevation certificate when it renewed. So when it renews, this house has a basement now. It's below where it floods. That premium is going to be probably triple what it was before. Under this act, they were doing away with that because they were trying to bring everyone in line with what the true rate should be. And the only way to determine what a rate really should be is by having an elevation certificate. Because it talks of that elevation certificate, I don't know if you all are real familiar with one, but it gives a base flood elevation of where the land should flood. And then it talks about your house, where this land should flood 8.6 feet. But the lowest floor of your house is at 8 feet. You're below where it floods. And then if you have a basement, it's probably at 6 feet. So you're 2 feet below where it floods. So that means your rate's higher. So they talked about doing away with this under the Act also, which would mean people's rates were going to go up. So then, and the rest of this I'll leave for you just to kind of reference. So then what happened is Congress has met recently, and last night President Obama was supposed to sign a new bill saying, you know, this is a little tough, and people can't afford it, and that's going to affect real estate prices and mortgage rates, and we're going to not do that. So now it's all back to the drawing board that a lot of this may be done away with. So like I said, just when you think you got it, it changes. So that's kind of the good news. So what he was talking about last night, he was going to, the program that's supposed to happen, they're going to allow grandfathering again, which is good. So that helps when you have someone that's been in a house for a long time, they know it's built in compliance with the codes at the time, and their rate will be reasonable. And they're going to limit the rate increases. Now it's only going to be 5% for renewals. So that should help. They're still talking about the 25% for the secondary home or the rental home. So you'll still see that. But anyhow, that should be good news. He was supposed to sign it last night. I'm not sure if it happened or not. And another thing that can help you all, and I see this happen a lot, you have a client that buys a home that's on a crawl space. And especially if a home was built, say, in the 60s or the 50s, those aren't true flood vents that are in the crawl space. And here's what happens when you do have a elevation certificate, and it says that land floods at 8.6 feet. On that elevation certificate, it tells you where the lowest floor of the house is, which could be at 8 feet, okay, which is below where it floods. But you don't live in that crawl space that's underneath. And if that crawl space is what we call properly vented. And properly vented means, for example, if there's 1,000 square feet of crawl space underneath the house, FEMA wants there to be 1,000 square inches of venting. So the water flows underneath the house. It doesn't collect around the house and weaken the structure and the foundation of the house. And if that's the case, you don't consider your lowest floor at 8 feet. You consider it on top of crawl space, which could be like 9 feet. So then your premium gets a huge credit instead of a huge surcharge because you're under. So I see a lot of clients buy a house and we get an elevation certificate, and it's not what we call properly vented. They see vents, they say, well, I have vents in my house, but they're humidity vents. Back in the 50s and 60s, they built them that way so that the vents would shut down. For it to be a true flood vent, they can never shut down. They have to be no more than a foot off the ground, and there has to be equal venting for the square footage. So a lot of times people say, well, I have vents. I'm like, yeah, but they're not flood vents. And they look at them and say, oh, they shut. So all you have to do is replace the vents, and it can change the premium. I've seen a lot of clients drop their premium more than half. And I'll go to closing, and the premium will be like $3,000. And they're complaining about it. And I said, well, you know, if you change those vents, it'll change it. And they can change that rate at any time. They can get a contractor to come out there and change the vents, or sometimes they don't have enough vents. They may need 10 vents, and they only have 5. Well, you can knock out some brick and put some vents in. And there's also something called smart vents. They cover 200 square inches of venting. And a lot of new homes that are built with that. You don't run into this problem with brand new homes because the rules have changed now. When the contractors build the house, they know to do that. So that'll help you a lot of times when you have a sale. I know a lot of times the flood insurance is the deterrent. They're like, I can't buy this house. Flood insurance is too much. Or I don't want to have to worry about flood insurance. That helps tremendously. I mean, we'll see a premium go from $3,000 to like $500 or $600. And people are very happy. But if there's a garage that's attached to the house, the garage has to have the venting also. And sometimes that's hard to do the vents in the garage. It has to be on two opposite walls. And sometimes you can't do that because it runs into the house. So you can put it on the garage door. That helps have a large vent there. So keep that in mind. That'll help you tremendously when that happens. So if you have any questions, I'm sure you do, let me know. And I just want to give you an overview of what's going on, what's going to happen. The remapping, I don't think is going to be a huge effect. It'll require that some people have flood insurance, but their premium shouldn't be terrible. This new act, keep your brochure just handy because it will help you if someone asks you a question, but all of this is totally change.